June 1944, Eastern Front, World War II. The Red Army launches Operation Bagration, a massive offensive that shatters German lines and drives the Soviets deep into occupied territory. Several months later, as Soviet troops cross into the Third Reich for the first time, they carry with them a burning desire for revenge for the devastation the Nazis had unleashed in Russia. What follows is a wave of looting, destruction, civilian killings, and above all, the systematic mass rape of German women. Between January and August 1945, up to 2 million German women fall victim to sexual violence at the hands of Red Army soldiers, making it the largest recorded incident of mass rape in human history. The Second World War had begun on September 1, 1939, with Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland. In the early years, German forces advanced rapidly. Poland fell, France was conquered, and British troops barely escaped at Dunkirk in 1940. Riding high on these victories, Hitler turned his attention eastward. On June 22, 1941, under the codename Operation Barbarossa, Germany launched a massive invasion of its former ally, the Soviet Union. But this was no ordinary military campaign. It was a war of annihilation. For the Nazis, it was both an ideological and racial struggle. German fascism against Soviet communism, Aryans against so-called subhuman Slavs and Jews. What followed was a campaign of unparalleled brutality. As the Wehrmacht advanced, the SS and mobile killing squads, the Einsatzgruppen, systematically targeted civilians, especially Jews, communists, and anyone deemed undesirable by Nazi ideology. Entire villages were massacred. Millions of Soviet POWs were starved, worked to death, or executed. Cities like Kiev, Minsk, and especially Leningrad became symbols of Nazi barbarity through sieges, mass shootings, deportations, forced starvation, and the destruction of entire communities. The ultimate goal was to depopulate the region and make way for Hitler's vision of Lebensraum, or living space, for Germans. The tide of war began to turn with the Soviet victory at Stalingrad in February 1943, the first major defeat for Hitler's army. From that moment, the Red Army began pushing westward, reclaiming lost ground, and driving the Nazis back with growing momentum. By the summer of 1944, the Soviets had expelled the Germans from their territory, and by October they stood at the gates of East Prussia. As Soviet forces crossed into German lands, the full force of retribution was unleashed. Years of suffering, propaganda, and personal loss fueled a campaign of vengeance. The most horrific and far-reaching aspect of this revenge was the mass rape of German women. In countless towns and cities, the violence was not isolated or spontaneous, but widespread, systematic, and prolonged, lasting for weeks, even months, as the Red Army advanced into the heart of Germany. Soviet war correspondent Natalia Jess later admitted that Red Army soldiers raped virtually every female they encountered, from 8 to 80, describing them as an army of rapists. In Berlin alone, hospitals recorded between 95,000 and 130,000 cases of rape, with roughly 10,000 women dying afterward, many by suicide. Across East Prussia, Silesia, and Pomerania, at least 1.4 million women were assaulted, and the death toll connected to these attacks may have reached 240,000. Many women were raped repeatedly, some as many as 60 to 70 times. This brutality was not only tolerated but expected within Soviet ranks, and some soldiers even engaged in pedophilia. A Soviet female telephone operator described how, during the capture of each town, the first 3 days were unofficially reserved for looting and rape. She recalled seeing a German woman lying naked with a hand grenade between her legs, and said, "Now I feel shame, but not back then. We hated their clean, undamaged white houses with roses. I wanted them to suffer." For many Red Army soldiers, these acts were framed as revenge, a twisted reward for the devastation Nazi Germany had caused in their homeland. One Soviet major even joked that the troops were so starved for sex that they raped grandmothers, claiming the elderly women enjoyed it. In many cases, the long-feared stereotype of Mongol hordes, propagated by Nazi propaganda for over a decade, became terrifying reality for German civilians. The rapists were mainly Red Army soldiers, including men from the Far East and Central Asian republics, and survivors often describe them as having Mongolian features. Women huddled silently in basements and shelters while these husky Mongolians patrolled the streets above, unpredictable and violent. Girls were taught to stay hidden at all costs. Those who tried to hide were often discovered when soldiers shone flashlights into cellars and bunkers. Some women offered themselves to a single soldier in the desperate hope of avoiding gang rape. Actress Magda Wieland, hiding in Berlin, was dragged out by a 16-year-old soldier from Central Asia. He ejaculated prematurely. She offered herself for protection, but he ran off to boast, and another soldier raped her. Even her Jewish friend, Ellen Getz, was not spared. When neighbors told the soldiers she was Jewish, they coldly replied, "Frau ist Frau." A woman is a woman. As the assaults continued, women took desperate measures to protect themselves and their children. They smeared dirt on their faces, wore rags, and hid in attics, storage rooms, or pantries. Girls were hidden in closets or cupboards for days, hoping the soldiers would pass by without finding them. Mothers dared to leave their homes only at dawn, when soldiers were most likely drunk or asleep. In desperate attempts to protect their own daughters, some even betrayed the hiding places of other women. Berliners still remember the cries that echoed through streets of shattered buildings each night. One of the most tragic cases was that of Hannelore Kohl, the first wife of future West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. In May 1945, at just 12 years old, she was gang-raped by Soviet soldiers and thrown from a first-floor window as if she were nothing more than a sack of cement. She lived the rest of her life with a severe spinal injury and chronic illness caused by the assault. In 2001, decades later, unable to bear the weight of her trauma, she ended her life. The long-term consequences of these mass rapes were devastating, not only for the victims, but for German society at large. Countless women suffered internal damage, untreated infections, and lifelong psychological scars. Pregnancies often ended in miscarriages or dangerous abortions carried out without medical care. Those who gave birth brought children into the world labeled as Russian children, many of whom grew up in stigma, poverty, or abandonment in a nation already broken by war. In Berlin, infant mortality skyrocketed, with some estimates suggesting that as many as 90% of newborns did not survive in the immediate aftermath. The psychological toll was even more harrowing. Thousands of women, unable to live with their trauma or shame, took their own lives. Some were forced into suicide by fathers seeking to preserve family honor, while others were killed by husbands who accused them of having allowed the assaults to happen. Those who tried to continue living often faced scorn, humiliation, and cruelty from fellow Germans. Many were publicly insulted, threatened, or silenced, and countless women never spoke of their suffering again. Historians estimate that up to 2 million German women were raped by Soviet soldiers. In Berlin alone, thousands, perhaps as many as 10,000, are believed to have committed suicide in the aftermath. The Red Army's mass rapes remain one of the darkest, least discussed chapters of the Second World War. Nearly every household in Eastern Germany was touched by this horror, leaving behind generations of pain. For decades, both Soviet and German narratives buried the truth. But for the women who endured it, the memories never faded. One survivor put it simply, "We survived the war, but we never truly survived the peace that followed." Thanks for watching the Front of History channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.